Welcome, everyone. My name is Abby Bullard. If those of you who don't know me, I'm the development manager at Atlanta Contemporary, so thanks for being here today. Here we go. So Darien, he is known for incorporating the glitch aesthetic into the ceramic vernacular. His work addresses thoughts of memory, technological integration, mark making, and perceptual consciousness. So while his original draw to the ceramic medium was the physical nature in which it is manipulated, during his graduate school studies at Arizona State University, he found clay to be a relevant medium to explore the relationship of illusion to inform thought and physicality. Darien has continued the exploration of these ideas and processes through multiple relocations, including time spent as a visiting artist at the College of Creative Studies in Detroit, and assistant professor at Buffalo State College, and a true world traveler. His most recent transition from being a full-time studio artist in Copenhagen, Denmark, he has joined Georgia State University here in Atlanta as an assistant professor. Darien's work has been recognized nationally and internationally through awarded grants, exhibitions, and residencies. In 2012, he was awarded the Emerging Artist Award through NCECA, and most recently received an exhibition grant from the Danish Cultural Ministry to complete a residency and exhibition opportunity through C.R.E.T.A. Rome. For this opportunity, he continued to integrate digital processes with traditional forming and surface treatments. And Darien is also represented by Alan Avery art company here in Atlanta off of Miami Circle. So I'll drop that link in the chat as well. So if you're interested in purchasing some of Darien's work and building a relationship with him, you can do that through Alan Avery as well. So
thanks. And thank you, Abby, for the introduction. And thanks for putting this together, Veronica and Abby and everybody else who's contributing their time. It's been great to be able to have this ability to share content. So I'm not able to be in my studio right now because of a family emergency. And my wife and I are currently in Finland. This is what Finland from here looks like anyway. And so we just got here on Wednesday, and because of this, I'm going to share a video with you. A video I put together for the Korean Biennial originally, but it's a good introduction to my work, and it takes place in the studio, so it kind of gives you an overview of that space and how I'm thinking about making my work. My work starts with the form. So I'm interested in clay as a medium that encompasses both physicality and sort of illusionistic space. Like it embodies both of those components. It exists ontologically and has a physical presence in space with viewers. And then as a ceramic artist, we're also very concerned with the surface, and those two things are unified through the firing in a way that other mediums don't necessarily have. Like glass is sort of similar, and then it's all infused. But like you paint on things, and they're sort of bound, but they're separate. They're layers. Where ceramics, the glaze is a layer, but it's integral to its surface. Like they become permanently bound. There's no removing the layer and getting to the substrate. And so I'm interested in that as a medium to then talk about the similarity in human consciousness and perceptual awareness and perceptual consciousness, because we are inevitably bound as physical entities, and we have a conscious experience. So we have ontological and phenomenological experience both. And so, yeah, it's the surface physical component that's really intriguing for me as a medium, and that's sort of what keeps me with the medium. Though I do mixed media pieces. So for the Atlanta Contemporary, I do work on paper also, sometime oil on paper, and enjoy that quite a bit as well. But I come from a relationship that's developed with clay, and most recently I've been using porcelain.
Hi, my name is Darien Arikoski-Johnson. I'm an assistant professor at Georgia State University, and I reside in Atlanta, Georgia. My studio is at Atlanta Contemporary, the art center here in Atlanta. in the studio arts program. Today you're in my studio where I can talk a little bit about my work and the process involved with my work and some of the things that I'm thinking about in relationship to the things that I'm currently making. Most recently, I've been hand building my pieces and allowing the physicalness of the resulting form to have more of an impact on the development of the composition that resides upon it. My process starts with me rolling out a slab of clay, and instead of cutting it and sort of dictating what I want that shape to be, that sort of shape that starts the creation of the form, I roll the slab and then fold the sides over and then roll and then fold, in that way giving the material some voice. And then from there, I build and pinch and coil around that as a starting point. It's a very intuitive process that is led by ideas of the body, and then that becomes the impetus for the development of the form from that point forward. The three-dimensional form is set in place, and then I roll out more slabs that are sized in relationship to the more three-dimensional component of the form, and then suspended over it from above and attached and located, and so that the physical form has an impact over the way that those slabs exist in space. And then from there, the sculpture has an influence over the two-dimensional composition that resides on the surface. So the clay is this wonderful medium in that it can talk about both the way it exists as a form in space, so its ontological existence, as well as having a surface that is in relationship and fused to that form. We are both physical entities, but we also have a phenomenological existence, an existence that's in our brain's interpretation of the information with which it senses. It's a poetic use of marks that create a conversation about memory, create a conversation about a change in perceptual experience. How does interface affect our consciousness today? How do you make a gesture in digital space? What does it mean to have a physical relationship with a digital device? These are some of the bigger questions that I'm interested in. The square has symbolic meaning, the pattern of the square. So one, it points to the digital space. So it's the symbol used in Photoshop to point to the alpha state or to zero. So it means that there's no information on that particular layer. So it's another symbol for zero. And so that for me, it points to this language, this system of understanding, which is mathematics, and how when Fibonacci brought zero to mathematics, it fundamentally shifted that system of understanding, which then allowed mathematicians to develop new theories and work towards new ideas based on that fundamental shift. And so I think we're also experiencing, with the integration of interface in our society, a fundamental shift in visual language, and in a way, a shift in the way we understand things visually. And then the squares that are carved, the discrepancy between the squares that are carved, and then they act as a transition when I paint these little shadows in to give it the illusion of depth, so that acts as a transition from the physicality of the form into the illusionistic two-dimensional information. That talks about being able to send tactile empathy into the future. So each square is carved by hand with a little loop tool versus being stamped. Like the way it would push in if it was stamped would be slightly different. And in knowing that, you can then empathize with the maker in sort of the meditative state that is evoked by engaging in a process like that. So a lot of what I'm thinking about, and some of the major questions in the work are about perceptual consciousness, but also how memory plays into our perception of things, and how memory is malleable and manipulated through its own use. So the idea that a recollection can be recalled and then is stored again, but when it's restored, the memory has altered. So the campfire layer is inserted here. So I was talking about the breaks of the plane and how information is moved from one point to another, both internally. So like you recall a memory and then you store a memory, that idea that the information is coming from storage to conscious thought and then back from conscious thought to storage. So there's it's like places of disruption, these plane breaks. So then there's also drip components. It's like drips to me is sort of this idea of that everything's sort of malleable. Like it emphasizes the malleability of the material, but also the malleability of perception and memory and thought. I take photographs usually of things that are fairly mundane or overlooked, and then I paint it onto these pieces of paper with watercolor and gouache. And then these are scanned and become material for me. So that's that idea of painting by hand is important to me. Like that's as sort of deeply connected as I can be to an observation, where it becomes a really strong developed memory of this thing and a material to digitally manipulate. So essentially I then digitally paint with a painting. So then after these are scanned, they're brought into Photoshop and manipulated. And then once the digital composition is done, then they're turned into ceramic decals. So we have a decal printer at school. So the tour has been changed to a ceramic-based medium, which then transfers over to the surface of the piece and is fired on and fused to the surface.
Thanks, Abby. So now, maybe there's some questions that have arisen that I can just address.
Hi, Darien. This is Jordan Amirkhani. Thank you for giving us this time today. I guess my question is you say you have the majority of your relationship is with clay, but as you stated, you have all of these sort of earlier processes that come from a variety of media that end up in a ceramic form. And I know you were talking about earlier that, you know, these works that you are making, at least right now, have a deep relationship with the body. And I'm wondering what that layering of media and processes before have to do with the sort of final conceptual ways you're talking about your work in terms of memory, in terms of the body, in terms of relationships between physical and conscious space. Do you think that layering of media and material supports your conceptual thinking about this work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thanks, Jordan. Yeah, I have the longest relationship, I think, with clay, but I also have come from just technically painting a lot back in high school. I guess I painted first and then got into clay more in college. And I'm rooted there. And then with the current work, certainly actually more of my time technically is probably spent doing the renderings and doing the digital manipulation than it is even creating the clay forms. But and like you stated, the end result ends up being clay, and I think that is really important because it is that, like I said, is that medium that embodies so well both the idea of physical and illusionistic space or surface, and that's really critical and really important for the ceramic medium. And then like painting, and I mentioned it in the video, painting by hand on paper allows me to sort of really articulate that observation, and then internalize that observation, and then well, it does both. So like, I mean, any memory is also bottom up, top down situation in which you're observing something out here, and then you're comparing it to everything you've previously stored in here, and then it's like cyclical. And that kind of happens through all these processes for me too, where, I'm painting it by hand, and that sort of gives me the output, but it also affects me internally, in forming that bond with that observation. And then by scanning that and digitizing it, that makes it like I'm then painting with a memory. So it's like painting with a painting, but it's also the painting becomes like a memory in a sense. And then so I'm able to manipulate that memory digitally. And so engaging in each of those processes is really important for me.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. It helps me also think about like processes also being a space where things are both manipulated, forgotten, stored, and then sort of come back into the process maybe later or never in the object. So there are a lot of I think philosophical and interesting ontological sort of issues and ideas and questions about ceramics that I think you're working with in really interesting ways. So thank you for answering that question.
Thanks. Yeah, no problem. It's the how with ceramics is so important, and in a way that's given ceramics a bad rap because people get so infatuated with the wheel or the firing process, and in a way that almost becomes somewhat superficial. But when you really figure out how the how and the why are connected, it becomes like a more holistic thing.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to probably wrap up in about a minute, sure. 1:25, but we have one more question in the chat, which is, what is your experimentation process like in your studio? Have you ever tried playing with video within your paintings? And that's from Lindsay Flax. So if you want to wrap it up with that question, and then we'll be moving on to the next tour. So thank you so much, everyone. And sorry for the trouble.
That's okay. Thanks, Lindsay. I often just make things that you aren't ever shown. I just have an idea and I just go down a tangent. There's been a number of those where I've done a portrait in the last couple of years. I've got a commercial tile piece that we'll see if I ever finish. So experimentation ends up for me just working on something new and to see if it works. And sometimes it informs and sometimes it doesn't. I haven't really played around with video too much. I'm actually thinking about playing around with augmented reality a little bit. Maybe we'll see. But for some reason, video, and even in grad school, people recommended video to me, projecting onto the forms that I was making, and somehow video is it was always separate from the thing. And so I liked being the surface and the object being connected wholeheartedly is important to me. So that never worked with video as of yet anyway. But thanks for the question. And thanks for coming.
Well, thank you everyone for being here. And Darien, we hope you remain safe and healthy and travel well back to us in Atlanta when you return from Finland. But our next Zoom room is with Myra Green at 1:30. So we're going to go ahead and say goodbye. And I hope everyone has a lovely day, and we'll see you in another Zoom room soon.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.